Hey everybody, it's a sunny Saturday afternoon, and I thought I'd do another Cheap Heat video. So here it is, coming right at you. I seem to get a good review or a good response from doing the Enja stuff, like all, label focused. So I'm going to continue with that. I'm going to talk about the Inner City label, always one of my favorite labels, and just a veritable feast of musical styles and cheap albumness. I mean, a lot of these records are insanely cheap. A couple of them are climbing up, but a lot of them are still under $10 or even less. You might still find them in a dollar bin somewhere. Certainly on Discogs, most of these records are less than $10. Minus postage and tax. We've all got to pay tax now. So anyway, I'm going to get started. Now, what I decided, since Inner City was really prolific, I mean, hundreds of releases on the label, what they did was they would distribute or license records that had been issued in Europe and Japan and other countries and reissue them here in the US. The pressings weren't always great, but sometimes they're pretty good. They're always serviceable, I would say. So I'm not going to talk about any of the licensed Inner City things. These are all original productions, except one, which I'm not quite sure. The pedigree seems very strange, and it's the last record I'm talking about. But all these are Inner City productions of mostly U.S.-based groups, and not all. And some of this stuff is utterly fantastic. Don't miss out by neglecting the Inner City label. And of course, the records they licensed, the albums they licensed from European labels like Enja, a bunch of small ones, East Wind in Japan. I'm trying to think, who else did they go for? Of course, it escapes me now. But you just can't miss out on this stuff. Black Lion, I think they did, a British label, released a lot of straight ahead jazz, released a lot of avant-garde jazz, and released a lot of fusion, which is my thing, I'll have to say, above all. I do like all kinds of jazz, though. Anyway, what are we listening to? We're listening to one of the most neglected and under-recognized, but great releases on the Inner City label. This is side 2 of John Stowell's Golden Delicious record. And Stowell, as you can tell, is a guitar player. He loves that guitar. My God, look at him. He's enraptured. This is a great record. You're going to hear it the whole time. John Stowell, Claudio Roditi on trumpet, Jim McNeely on piano. He also composed a bunch of these tunes. That alone is a reason to get this LP. Jim McNeely is a heavy musical force. Mike Richmond on bass, David Friesen on bass on one track, Billy Hart on drums, Dom Umramau on percussion. This is a really fine record, kind of in the modern, mainstream, contemporary jazz vein. It's not really a fusion record. Stowell plays a hollow body electric with no effects, just that pure sound. If you dig Jim Hall, Pat Martino, people like that, you're going to love this record. Seek it out. Golden Delicious by John Stowell. It came out in 1977. Most of these records will be from the late 70s. Speaking of David Friesen, I just mentioned him. He's on one track on this. David Friesen is a remarkable bass player. I mean, super heavy, super heavy, and he's still active. He's in his mid-80s. He's still making albums and playing live. He plays a 300-year-old bass. Anyway, this is possibly his first solo album. It came out on Inner City. It's a Inner City production. It's not from another label. It's called Star Dance, as you can tell, and the personnel is wonderful. Paul McCandless from Oregon on double reeds, English horn, and oboe. John Stowell on guitar again, not playing a distorted sound, but very straightforward sound. And the X factor on this record is Steve Gadd. If you ever wondered what Steve Gadd sounded like going out, this is a good place to start. He really, he hangs with these guys. It's not a free jazz record, but it's definitely a complicated and not straight ahead record. Gadd is not on all of it. So there's some solo bass. There's bass and English horn and guitar trios. There's some duos. There's a bass and drums duo. But I think the entire quartet plays on 5 tracks. It's really great. It's a great record. In my youth, when I bought these, this is from 1976, so I was junior in high school. I was really looking for a fusion sound, so I tended to sort of poo-poo these things because they didn't have like distorted electric guitar. They didn't have Fender Rhodes like Mahavishnu or Weather Report or any of the groups I really was into. Looking back as an older human being, I really value these. There's some very deep musicality going on, and these David Friesen records are no exception. He recorded an album in the 80s called Amber Skies for the Palo Alto Jazz label that is a must-have, with Paul Motion and Chick Corea amongst others. Joe Henderson is on it too. If you ever see that, Amber Skies, I've talked about this in one of these earlier videos. It's killing with those people. It's killing. Anyway, his second record, Friesen's second record for the label, was Waterfall Rainbow. And this came out in 1977, along with the Stowell record. And the personnel is incredible on this. Ralph Towner and John Stowell on guitars. Towner playing acoustic and 12-string. Stowell playing electric. Paul McCandless again from the previous. Nick Bignola on bari sax. Yeah. Bob Moses on drums. The great Rakalam Rabot Moses on drums, and he crushes it on this. There's some very uncanny stuff rhythmically going on here. He and Friesen are quite the dynamic duo. And Jim Saporito, I think he was mostly an orchestral percussionist. He plays little percussion and adds a lot. He's not on every track. But there's, again, some bass solos on this, and some, they divide the group up into subgroupings. But for the most part, this is a larger ensemble record, and exceptionally good. Exceptionally good. And again, it's a $5 record. You might even find it in a dollar bin. Waterfall Rainbow. David Friesen is in the Pacific Northwest. I think he lives in Portland, Oregon, or someplace like that. And he's, like I said before, he's still around, still active. A truly profound musician. Speaking of truly profound musicians, one thing the Inner City label did with its own in-house productions was it tended to pick regional musicians. And as a regional musician myself, I have great fondness for that. Of course, I'm not on the same level as these guys. These guys are super pros. I'm a hobbyist. That said, everybody makes records now. But I mean, they picked up a lot of guys who really deserve to be heard by a wider audience. One of those people is saxophonist and composer Ernie Krivda. I've spoken about his first Inner City release. It's called Satanic. I still have it. It's in the stacks. But I really wanted to concentrate on this because I always kind of wrote this off as kind of an okay record. But it's actually killing. It's really, really good. And he did a third record that I've never had with a local rhythm section that's really good. But I don't have it anymore. But The Alchemist is his second release on Inner City. It's a in-house production, not licensed. And again, the personnel is off the chain. Bob Moses on drums, Eddie Gomez on bass, Gil Goldstein on piano, Krivda on tenor, soprano, and flute, and Ray Mantilla on percussion. This is a great record. Some really interesting compositional stuff going on. Again, Bobby Moses is beyond magnificent on this, doing some very, very transgressive and wonderful percussion work, as well as drum set work. It's all really one where he's concerned. Anyway, all original compositions by Ernie Krivda, no standards, no nonsense. This is great all the way through. The cover's a little cheesy, but we'll forgive that. Ernie Krivda, though, get The Alchemist if you don't have it already. I can't remember what the third record he did was called, but it had a Cleveland-based rhythm section, and it's good. It's good, but I think I sold it years ago. You can always recop these things, though, which is nice. And there's a couple of records that I don't have anymore that are inner city productions that would fall into this, that would be in this, but I don't have them anymore. So I tried to mine through the collection and get them all, though. So this is what I've got. Here's another issue from Inner City, again, a in-house production. Richard Sussman, he's a piano player. He did a duet record with Andy Laverne, another piano player, and I think Bob Moses on drums, and called Tributaries. And I was looking everywhere for that. I can't find it. I don't know what happened to it. Anyway, that has a lot of electric keyboards on it. This is all acoustic. It's sort of a modern, modal, contemporary jazz effort. It's very nice. Not my favorite record that I'll be talking about today, but if you're into just modern jazz, go for this one. It's all acoustic. Richard Sussman on a piano, Tom Harrell, Larry Schneider, Jerry Bergonzi. Yeah, that's a front line. Mike Richmond and Jeff Williams, the great Jeff Williams on drums from Lookout Farm. And Mike Richmond, also no slouch. Here's an album that is similar in instrumentation and nature, but is a lot more interesting to me. And I just got hip to it. Larry Vukovich, piano player, and went on to record very prolifically for a series of small labels in the US. But this was his first, and I really like this a lot because he really delves into the Balkan music world with the weird time signatures and the minor key, melodic minor type sounding stuff. I love that stuff. Can't get enough of it. It's all acoustic, but again, superb musicianship. And there's a couple of standards on this, but I think, and a blues, but there's some very long tracks on here. An 8-minute track called Blue Balkan that is real Balkan. Just a really cool record. The front line is really interesting too. He's got on a couple of tracks, he's got Eric Golub on viola and violin. And Bobby Hutcherson is on vibes on most of this. But for the most part, it's really a trio record with John Hurd or Paul Breslin on bass, and either Eddie Moore or Eddie Marshall on drums. I believe Vukovich was a Bay Area guy for a while. Anyway, if you ever see this, pick it up. It's really good. Again, he delves into some more traditional jazz type sounds, but there's enough Balkan strangeness on this and fire that it's a keeper. Okay, now we're getting a little bit more fusiony, just a little bit more fusiony. This guy actually was from Roanoke, Virginia, which is close to Virginia Tech, which is where I did grad school. And I always wondered, I had this record back then. It came out in, I think, 1980. So I would have had it before I moved to, started in grad school at Virginia Tech. I always wondered if I'd run into this guy, but they had already moved on. I started grad school in Blacksburg in '84, and most of these guys were long gone. Anyway, this is a really unusual record. By the looks of it, you'd think it would be a blues record with the cigarette and the guitar, and Dark Blue Man is the title of the record. It's actually licensed. This was released as a private press record And for the purposes of this release, get this one, because the private press has 6 tracks. This has 8. And there's a solo guitar piece and a small combo piece with trumpet, bass, and drums, along with the guitar, that don't appear on the OG. So it's worth your while to hunt this one down. This is a really interesting record. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's kind of, some of it is, there's 4 guitar solo tracks, and there's some other very quiet tracks, and then there's 3, I think, 4 maybe, tracks of the large ensemble, drums, keyboards, horns, etc. But they're kind of complicated, jazzy, not really fusion, but almost. It's kind of got sort of an organ, if organ had drums, kind of feel to it. But that doesn't even really do it justice. It's a really unusual record. I really like this. I'm still waiting for the follow-up. He did do another CD in the 90s. It's got all drum machines on it. I was very bummed. This guy, along with the Gene Elder, who co-produced this, most of these guys were bluegrass musicians. And I think they had an interest in jazz and fusion and decided to go ahead and do it. And interestingly, a lot of these guys moved out to LA and the Bay Area. And I know this guy, Ray Wilkes, recorded with Mick Gillette and some of the Tower of Power guys. He wasn't in Tower of Power, but he recorded on their solo and side projects. Pretty interesting. I wonder if he's still in the Bay Area. I should ask my friend Alex if he is. Anyway, it's a cool album. It's very unusual. Dark Blue Man. This is a great record. I've talked about it before, but I think it bears mentioning. A Minnesota local guy who wound up in the Manhattan Transfer as their music director and guitarist. Wayne Johnson recorded a bunch of records. This was his first. It's got Bill Berg on drums and Flim Johnson, who later joined Alan Holdsworth's band, on bass. It's a great record. I've talked about it before. If you like Pat Metheny Group, you're gonna love this. There's some keyboards too. I think he's like a Dave Wallace. I never heard of him. He's a Minnesota guy, I guess. All these guys are from Minneapolis. Anyway, fantastic record. Beautiful record. His follow-up's a little bit less wonderful, but still pretty wonderful. I have Grasshopper, which is the follow-up. Not on Inner City either. A guy that cannot be ignored is David Pritchard. This is his first solo album on Inner City, called Light Year, and he was known for working with Gary Burton, and he's on an obscure Gary Burton record, Alive in Japan release. It never was issued over here. I think he's on it anyway. Anyway, he wrote a piece for Gary Burton that appeared on Throb, but Jerry Hahn's the guitar player on Throb, and it became sort of a very popular. I can't remember the name of it though. Anyway, this is a really cool record. I really like this a lot. Pritchard is still became much more interested in avant-garde classical music and solo guitar stuff, but he recorded these 2 great fusion records. And this has Larry Klein on bass. He also, I think, produced it. He later married Joni Mitchell. Pretty wild, huh? Ted Saunders on keyboards, all Rhodes. Charles Orania on saxophones, very interesting musician, was in a band called Contraband that David Pritchard was also in. And Paul Krybik on drums. He gets around too. His name pops up in some very interesting places. This is a really great sort of jazz rock record. It's not a flaming jazz rock record though. It's more mellow. It's not exactly Weather Report-ish either. If you've heard Contraband, this is like a lot like that. It's electric, sort of electric avant-garde jazz, but not free, if that makes any sense. Anyway, nice record. You need to have it. He did do a follow-up, unlike a lot of these guys. It wasn't just a one-off. This is City Dreams. I think I've talked about this before. This has got an all-star lineup. Orania reappears on this, as does Larry Klein. But the other side people are Chester Thompson. Yes, that Chester Thompson. Patrice Rushen on keyboards. Wonderful. Freddie Hubbard on 2 tracks on trumpet. And then a couple of other lesser known but really great players. Mike Jochum on drums, who was in Kitty Hawk later on, another very interesting drummer. And Bruce Malament on synthesizer. Anyway, this is much more along the lines of a jazz rock fusion record, and it's got some really great moments. I really like this record a lot. I played this a lot, and it's almost in the Gramavision zone. You know, it's very brainy. It's a good record. And with Chester Thompson on drums, it's driving. He's not on all of it. Another record that I was always curious about, but I never got until recently, is this Gregory James. And I'm going to talk about Gregory James some more in future installations of this vlog, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, this is his first record. It's with his quartet. Very interesting personnel. It's called Alicia. And it's kind of a straight-ahead jazz/jazz funk record. There's some real funky stuff on this. There's a couple of open drum breaks on this that I think, I'm surprised it's still cheap, frankly. Anyway, the personnel are Gregory James on guitar. He's quite the chopsmeister. Barry Shulman on reeds, tenor saxophone and flute. He's got kind of a vibrato-y sound, almost like Eiler, but he's not out like Eiler, but he's got that kind of sound. Kind of like the guy in Marvin, a little bit. Maybe not that extreme. Randy Merritt on drums. Now this is a name. He's on a lot of very rare and collectible jazz funk records, most notably Premonition by Sedaka. Randy Merritt's on most of that. And his drumming is popping on this, let me tell you. And Andre St. James on bass. And he was a pivotal figure in the Pacific Northwest avant-garde jazz scene. He sadly just passed away recently, like within the last 2 years. And he actually played in a trio with some friends of mine, Tim DuRoche on drums and Tala McDonis on piano and keyboards. And he was a huge loss when he passed. Anyway, he's on this, playing acoustic bass, not a slap bass guy. But he's got a very interesting discography, mostly avant-garde jazz, definitely touching on some really interesting West Coast action like Idris Akamor and the Pyramids and bands like that. So this is a really interesting record. Oddly enough, it's really in the pocket and kind of straight ahead and or funky. All right, some better known names. Ursula Dudiaak, Michael Urbaniak, also recorded for the label. I don't have that. He did a record that was an original inner city production called Urbaniak. Has more or less the same personnel that this does. This was released, it's called Future Talk, under Ursula's name. I like Ursula Dudiaak. My wife was listening to this with me, and she's like, "What is that?" I had to laugh. But she's like the Polish Flora Purim. She's got the electronic effects on her voice. There's 3 minute or 2 minute long vocal solos on this where she goes to town with the effects. It's wild too. Nobody's really doing that kind of thing anymore. Anyway, great lineup. Buddy Williams on drums, Marcus Miller on bass, Calvin Brown and John Abercrombie on guitars, Zbigniew Namysławski on alto sax and a couple of compositions. Of course, Michael Urbaniak's on this, playing violin and lyricon on a couple of tracks. And of course, Ursula. And this is a really great record. I like this a lot. They did a Christoph Komeda tune on this called The Cats that you'll recognize. Anyway, this is just a fun fusion record. And this is, honest to God, jazz rock fusion. I'm a sucker. What can I say? I love it. Love it. All right, so we're firmly in jazz rock fusion land. This band is from New Orleans, and I don't think they would have ever seen the light of day nationally if it wasn't for Inner City Records. This is their debut record, and it is smoking. It's really a great fusion record. I like it a lot. The compositions are interesting. The playing is fantastic. The drumming on this in particular is great. Anyway, I lived in New Orleans when these guys were active, and I went out to see them a couple of times, and they were quite good in their days. Just 4 people, keyboards, bass, drums. Hi, sweetie. My wife's home. And Jimmy Robinson on guitar. Anyway, this album is a must-have if you're into jazz rock fusion at all. It's great. It's a real gem and can be had for very little money. They recorded a live follow-up that has some vocal tracks on it. It sounds like they're trying to get into the Police, sort of. I don't care for it, but you might like it. It's called Woodenhead Live. And I think they're still in action, just with different personnel. But this is a fantastic record and kind of a must-have if you're into jazz rock fusion. It's just called Woodenhead. All original compositions. The last two records are also must-haves. This record blows me away every time. Elsewhere by Master Cylinder. They're out of Dallas. And I'd never heard of any of these players before or since until I met Russell Scanlon, who's a wonderful guitarist from Austin, or lived in Austin. He's actually not from Austin. Anyway, he knew these guys. And if you look in Discogs and you trace their sort of pedigree through time, they're all very active. Eddie Dunlap was in a couple of groups. He's the drummer. The guitar player, I think, what's his name? Robert Atwood. Russ knew him or knows him. And Russ was like, that guy was off the chain. He was fantastic. Keyboard, Joe Rogers, and bassist Jack Carter. Anyway, if you like complicated fusion and or prog, like sort of like they kind of compare to the Muffins or maybe National Health, but more jazz than Canterbury, you will dig this. This is an incredible record. It used to be, for some reason, really, really expensive, like $30 or something like that. But I've noticed that the prices have come down into reality. So there's a few cheap copies bouncing around out there. If you are into the complex jazz rock fusion, prog fusion, you need to get this. This is such a tremendous record. And it's hard to believe it's from Dallas, Texas, of all places. Never think of Dallas as being the home of anything progressive. I'm not going to say anything else. Okay, last record. This is my longest video yet. If you're still with me, wonderful. Joji Hirota. Joji Hirota. He also goes by George Hirota. And this is his second record, but his first on... So it was released in Germany on a small German label that mostly did sort of lightweight, not progressive, not jazz records, called Jupiter. Anyway, I'm not sure if Inner City licensed it from them or they licensed it from Jupiter. I'm not sure which way it went. But this is a really interesting record. His very first record is much more of a jazz rock thing, and it's very expensive, very hard to get a hold of. This, on the other hand, is very easy to find, and it's got really interesting personnel, more or less the same personnel as his first solo record under the name George Hirota. This has got, get this, Brian Miller from Isotope and Turning Point on keyboards, Cornel Kovac, well-known Yugoslavian musician, on keyboards, Adrian Lee on keyboards. He was later on associated with like the British pop sort of thing, like the Buggles and bands like that. He wasn't in that band, but I think he was in that sort of world. Paul Robinson on drums. Colin Hodgkinson on bass, misnamed on the back as Colin Hodgkins. But Colin Hodgkinson, if you've been following these, is the bass player that was in Backdoor, the great British trio. Steve Cook on bass also, later joined Soft Machine. And a vocalist on a couple of tracks. And yeah, another vocalist, I think his wife, on a couple of tracks. Anyway, this guy was a protege of Stomo Yamashita. So if you dig Stomo Yamashita's edgier stuff, more jazz rock stuff, this is kind of like that. There's sort of a new age percussion aspect to this as well. But it's really an interesting record. And I played both sides thinking this may or may not be heat. It's certainly cheap. But no, I unreservedly recommend it. And so it thus ends the broadcast. My wife's home. She wants to watch TV. Anyway, thank you for sticking with this. I hope this has been some use to you. And I'm going to come back at you with fewer records next time, so you don't have to watch this thing for half an hour. And you can always, I don't care. You can always sweep through and see what I talk about. Anyway, thanks and see you next time.